In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the fly stitch, which is a great way to stitch leaves. And there's a couple different ways to do this. The first one I'm showing you here is what's more traditionally shown in books, which is where you start at sort of the tip of the leaf with a straight stitch. That stitch kind of helps you set your angle. Then you're going to come up on one side of that straight stitch and down on the other side, sort of parallel to where you came up on the first side. And you're going to tack this stitch down in the center right above that straight stitch you just did. And these tacking stitches ultimately become sort of the center vein of your leaf. So I'm going to kind of go up through here and tack this down. You want your tacking stitches to either go back down in the same hole or cross an intersection at the largest, because again, you want these stitches to be kind of compact and close together. Occasionally, because of the angle of your leaf, you might have a little bit of gap that you can easily just go back in and fill in with a long stitch. But it is a really easy thing to do and something that really gives that great leaf shape. I purposely drew two different leaves here, one with a center vein and one without a center vein. So you can kind of see the one without the center vein, I can create that center vein to go sort of any direction I want it to go. I can go more like center down the leaf. I can kind of curve it. And in the next leaf, I drew that center vein with more of a curve. That is one of the great things about this stitch, is that it can really help you stitch leaves of all like shapes, sizes, curves, dimensions. So you just kind of keep going sort of up one on one side and up one on the other side, again kind of keeping it sort of parallel to each other, and tack it down where you want your center vein to be. And that's the center vein tacking stitches can kind of move along any plane or any path that you want them. So I could continue going along this center way. I could start to curve it here, and like I said, I see there's like a little gap here of my straight stitch if you're not getting your angles to be totally covered, which sometimes happens more up here at the base. And if that's the case, you can always just go in through here and fill in any of those gaps that show up with another longer straight stitch. That is sort of how it's traditionally shown, is starting at the tip. I sometimes like to start at what I'll call like more of the base of the leaf. Sometimes I find that that is just an easier way for me to like sort of set that angle. So the ultimate steps are basically the same. So I'm going to start here and kind of go what is close to parallel on the other side of that leaf. And I'm going to tack this down sort of where this center vein is drawn. So you can already see with this tacking stitch, it's going to leave some straight stitches to fill in here at the end, and that's totally fine. That happens a lot of the time just based on how the leaf is painted. But in this way, you sort of continue on the same path with those loops and sort of creating that center vein in the sort of arc and direction and angle you want it to be of those tacking stitches. It's important to kind of pull that loop tighter before you tack it, because if you don't pull it tight enough, it's gonna gap and leave that sort of loose area that you don't want to do. So you want to make sure that once you bring your needle up to this tacking stitch, that you pull it tighter before you actually tack it down. But as you can see here, I'm going along and I'm filling in, trying to get to this center vein that I've drawn on my leaf here. And this sort of creates this perfect little vein line and helps you sort of follow the path of that vein to create the perfect angle that you want for that leaf. I love this stitch. I do this a lot for many different leaves. A lot of times I'll just leave that center vein exactly as it is, with those tacking stitches becoming the vein. Sometimes I'll use those tacking stitches almost like a wrap back stitch, and I'll wrap it with like another thread. You know, sometimes the veins are painted darker and you can like wrap a darker thread through those tacking stitches and it'll sort of give you that look. But that's the great thing about a fly stitch, is that the stitch sort of creates that center vein without having to actually stitch it. So as you see in this one, just with the way I stitched it, it's creating more of those gaps, less so down here when I started at the tip. So again, all I have to do is go through and sort of fill in with some random straight stitches to sort of fill in those gaps. Sometimes, like I said, I stitch this using both techniques. Sometimes I find that it's easier to start at the base depending on the shape of the leaf. If the leaf is really wide at the base, like think of almost like a maple leaf, it's easier to start at the tip. But if it's narrower at the base, sometimes it's easier to start at the base. So again, once you kind of fill in there, your leaf will sort of take shape even if the center vein has stopped. So that is how you do the leaf stitch or the fly stitch. It's a really great one of leaves of all sizes, and hopefully you guys love this and use it on your next project.